Sorry, sir, but we don't accept walk-ins tonight, especially not during an exclusive event. The hostess's voice was firm, her eyes scanning Marcus Johnson and his little daughter from head to toe. Marcus, dressed in a plain shirt, tightened his grip on his daughter's hand. The 10-year-old girl, wearing a simple white dress, looked through the glass doors, her eyes wide with longing at the elegant plates being carried across the dining room. Marcus bent down and whispered, his voice both soft and aching. I promised I'd bring you here. This place used to be my world. For a fleeting second, pain and pride clashed in his eyes, and the question lingered in the air. Why was a man once tied so deeply to this place being pushed away from it now? The kitchen of La Lumière roared like a battlefield. Pans clanged against burners, flames leapt up from sauté pans as chefs tossed their ingredients with machine-like precision. Steam fogged the windows, mixing with the metallic scent of steel and the earthy aroma of mushrooms sizzling in butter. Orders were being shouted in rapid French, clipped and sharp, like commands barked by an army officer. Deux bouillabaisse, une entrecôte à point, et vite! The head chef's booming voice cracked like a whip. Every second counted. Every dish had to leave the pass perfect. The wrong shade of pink in a steak, the slightest drizzle of sauce out of place, and the plate would be tossed back into the hands of some trembling cook with nothing but shame to show for their efforts. In the corner, a young man with dark skin moved quickly, silently. He was lean, his shirt clinging to his back from the relentless heat, his eyes focused with the intensity of someone who could not afford a single mistake. His name was Marcus Johnson, one of the few black line cooks in the brigade. He wasn't supposed to be here, at least not according to many of his colleagues who had made their disdain obvious from the day he started. Yet Marcus kept his head down and his knives sharp. He remembered his mother's words. Son, if they won't open the door for you, break it down with your own 2 hands. So he did. Every shift, every hour, every plate. He gave more than what was asked of him. He peeled potatoes faster than anyone else, diced onions into perfect symmetrical cubes, cleaned fish with strokes so precise that even the senior chefs grudgingly admitted his skill. But skills alone weren't enough in this kitchen. Respect was a currency Marcus hadn't yet earned, and prejudice was a wall he had to scale daily. Johnson! One of the senior chefs barked. Your mirepoix looks like it was cut by a blind butcher. Fix it, or you'll be back washing dishes. Marcus swallowed the words he wanted to say, bit back the fire rising in his throat. Instead, he redid the task. Carrots, celery, onions, perfect cubes, precise as jewels. His hands moved so quickly they blurred, his knife never missing a beat. When he slid the cutting board back across the counter, even the senior chef couldn't find a flaw. He simply scowled and turned away. That was how Marcus fought his battles, not with words, but with the blade of his knife and the passion in his cooking, the weight of dreams. For Marcus, food was not just sustenance. It was memory, survival, and ambition woven into one. He grew up in a cramped apartment in the Bronx, where his mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. They didn't have much, but she always managed to create warmth around the dinner table. Her collard greens simmered with smoked turkey, her cornbread golden and fragrant, her fried chicken crisp and juicy. Those meals were Marcus's first lessons in love and resilience. At 13, Marcus discovered a second home in the kitchen of a neighborhood diner. He started washing dishes, but soon the owner noticed his curiosity and taught him small tasks, flipping pancakes, chopping onions. By the time Marcus was 17, he could run an entire breakfast shift on his own. But he wanted more than greasy spoons and neighborhood praise. He wanted to create food that could silence a room, food that could tell a story without a single word spoken. So when he heard La Lumière, one of the most prestigious restaurants in Manhattan, was hiring, he applied. The interview was grueling, the skepticism heavy, but Marcus's knife skills spoke louder than the doubt in the room. They hired him, and now here he was, just a few years later, standing in the center of chaos, carving out a place for himself dish by dish. The test. On one especially brutal night, a sous chef dropped a pan of seared scallops, just minutes before the plates were due to leave the pass. Panic rippled through the brigade. The head chef cursed and demanded a solution. Marcus stepped forward. "I can redo them. 2 minutes." The sous chef scoffed. "You! Stay in your lane!" But Marcus ignored him. His pan was already heating, butter foaming in seconds. He slid in the scallops, their surfaces kissing the pan with a sizzle. He didn't blink as he basted them in butter, adding sprigs of thyme, a crushed garlic clove. He moved with a speed and confidence that came from years of practice, from hours spent in his mother's kitchen, and nights spent studying techniques by flashlight with borrowed cookbooks. When he plated the scallops, golden, caramelized, glistening in a beurre blanc sauce, the head chef stopped to examine them. He tasted one, chewed, then said only one word. "Perfect." The room went silent. No praise, no applause. But for Marcus, that single word was enough to ignite a fire in his chest. The rise over the months, Marcus's reputation grew. He didn't just cook well, he innovated. He took traditional French techniques and dared to blend them with the flavors of his heritage. A touch of smoked paprika in a béarnaise sauce. Sweet potato puree alongside roasted duck. Collard greens reimagined with truffle oil. Some chefs mocked his ideas, calling them unrefined, too soul food for fine dining. But diners noticed. Critics began mentioning a new spark in La Lumiere's dishes. And eventually, the head chef himself, a stern Frenchman who rarely gave compliments, summoned Marcus after a successful service. "You have talent," he admitted, his accent heavy. "More than talent. You have vision. Do not waste it." It was the first time Marcus felt truly seen, the glimpse of tomorrow. Late at night, long after the last plate had been washed and the burners cooled, Marcus would sit alone in the kitchen. He would run his fingers over the worn wooden handles of his knives, stare at the empty dining room through the swinging doors, and imagine it filled with people tasting his food. Not just eating, but experiencing. He dreamed of menus with his name on them, of critics writing about his creations, of Michelin inspectors awarding stars to the work of his hands. He wasn't there yet, but for the first time in his life, Marcus could feel that tomorrow held something bigger, something that could change not only his future, but the story of every kid like him who was told they didn't belong. The day Marcus Johnson became head chef of La Lumiere was not marked by fanfare or champagne toasts. There was no formal announcement, no celebratory gathering. Instead, it came on a stormy Tuesday night when the executive chef collapsed mid-service with chest pains, and the responsibility of finishing the evening's menu fell squarely on Marcus's shoulders. At first, the dining room remained blissfully unaware of the chaos behind the kitchen doors. But inside, tension coiled like a spring. Servers darted in and out, unsure of who to look to for direction. The sous chefs, veterans of the brigade, hesitated, none eager to claim leadership. Marcus saw the panic rising and felt the weight of a choice pressing down on him. He could stay silent and let the kitchen crumble, or he could step forward. He chose the latter. "Listen up," Marcus shouted over the din, his voice cutting clean through the noise. "We're not losing tonight. You! Get the duck in the oven. You! Start the sauce. And someone plate the scallops now!" The room stilled. Orders were given. Hands moved. And within moments, the chaos reshaped itself into rhythm. Marcus commanded not with arrogance, but with certainty, his directions precise, his instincts unerring. By the time the final entree left the pass, not a single guest knew the night had almost collapsed. When the dust settled, the general manager appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Well," he said after a pause, "it seems we have a new chef de cuisine." The visionary touch. Unlike his predecessor, Marcus didn't just replicate recipes, he reinvented them. His philosophy was simple. Food should tell a story. Each dish had to carry not only taste, but memory, emotion, and identity. The brigade was skeptical at first. Classical French cuisine was sacred, untouchable in their eyes. But Marcus dared to blend tradition with innovation. He introduced a velvety sweet potato puree alongside roasted duck. braised short ribs slow-cooked with red wine and accented by a hint of smoked paprika, collard greens infused with truffle oil. "What is this?" One sous chef scoffed the first time he tasted the greens. "This isn't French." "No," Marcus replied evenly, "but it's honest. And if it's honest, people will taste it." He was right. Diners noticed, critics noticed, reviews began to trickle in, describing La Lumière as unexpectedly bold and a refreshing twist on tradition. The dining room transformed. It wasn't just about food. Marcus's leadership changed the very atmosphere of La Lumière. Under his guidance, the kitchen thrummed with a balance of discipline and respect. He demanded perfection, but he also listened, encouraged, and taught. Young cooks who once wilted under criticism now found themselves thriving, eager to learn from a chef who believed in them. And the dining room reflected that energy. The restaurant that had once been stiff and unyielding now pulsed with life. Guests lingered over dessert, whispering about the flavors they couldn't quite name, but couldn't forget either. One night, a well-known critic from the New York Times visited anonymously. Marcus, unaware of who sat at table 12, prepared a 5-course tasting menu from scratch. Each course built upon the last, weaving flavors into a crescendo. 2 weeks later, the review appeared. Under new leadership, La Lumière has found its soul. Every dish speaks not only of mastery, but of heart. This is cuisine that transcends culture while honoring it. Whoever this chef is, he deserves the city's attention. The call from Michelin. The buzz grew until one crisp autumn morning, Marcus received the call every chef dreams of. La Lumière was being awarded its first Michelin star. He stood in stunned silence as the words sank in. A Michelin star was more than recognition. It was history. For a boy from the Bronx, for a man who had fought his way through prejudice, sweat, and silence, it was proof that his dream was not only possible, but undeniable. When the brigade heard the news, the kitchen erupted in cheers. Knives were slammed against cutting boards, pots banged like drums. Some even clapped Marcus on the back, smiling for the first time without envy. For one night, he felt accepted, almost equal. Almost the erasure. The night of the official celebration was supposed to be his crowning moment. A gala was held in the grand dining room, filled with investors, journalists, and industry leaders. Photographers snapped pictures, glasses of champagne sparkled under the chandelier light. Marcus waited at the edge of the crowd, wearing his chef's whites, heart pounding with anticipation. His mother had always said, "One day, the world will know your name." He wanted that day to be now, but when the framed photographs appeared in the papers the following morning, his heart froze. The smiling faces of the owners filled the frame. The caption beneath the photo read, "The proud team of La Lumière celebrates its first Michelin star." Marcus's name was absent. His face was absent. The credit had been quietly, deliberately erased. The confrontation. He stormed into the manager's office that afternoon, the newspaper clenched in his fist. "Why am I not in the photo? Why is my name not mentioned?" The manager leaned back in his chair, his voice calm, almost rehearsed. "You should understand. Our investors and patrons prefer a certain image. They need to see consistency, familiarity. It's not personal. It's business." Marcus's blood boiled. Not personal? This was his life, his work, his soul poured into every dish. He wanted to scream, to tear down the walls with his rage. Instead, he stood frozen, because he knew what lay behind those words. The world wasn't ready to see a black man as the face of a Michelin-starred kitchen, the quiet resolve. That night, Marcus returned to the empty kitchen. He walked the line, touching each station as if saying goodbye. His knives lay in their case, polished and sharp, waiting. But for the first time, he wondered if they still belonged here. He thought of his daughter, Lily, still a toddler then, sleeping peacefully at home. He thought of the sacrifices his mother had made, of the legacy he wanted to pass on. Was it worth staying in a place that refused to acknowledge him? He stayed silent, but inside, something had begun to break. The star was supposed to mean victory. Instead, it left him hollow. The weeks following La Lumiere's Michelin triumph should have been the brightest of Marcus Johnson's career. Instead, they became the most suffocating. On the surface, everything glittered. Reservations filled weeks in advance. Wealthy patrons boasted about dining at New York's newest Michelin-starred jewel. The investors smiled broader, the owners congratulated themselves with handshakes and cigars, and the critics continued to heap praise upon the food. But for Marcus, the star had become a cage. He moved through the kitchen each night like a man walking with lead weights on his shoulders. His brigade followed orders faithfully. His dishes dazzled guests, but inside, resentment simmered. Every newspaper article that erased his name, every television segment that showcased the owners as visionaries, cut him deeper. He could hear his mother's voice echoing in his head. "Don't let them take away what you built, Marcus. Don't let them steal your story." And yet, every day, they did, the growing tension. It began subtly. Meetings about the menu were held without him. New investors were given tours of the kitchen, but introduced only to Daniel, the sous chef. Marcus's innovations were repackaged as the restaurant's signature style. One evening, as he was adjusting the seasoning on a pan of braised short ribs, the general manager entered with two impeccably dressed men. "Gentlemen," the manager said smoothly, gesturing toward Daniel, "this is the man responsible for the creativity in our kitchen." Marcus froze, spoon in hand. Daniel's face flushed with discomfort, but he said nothing. The investors shook Daniel's hand, nodding approvingly. Marcus felt invisible. Later that night, he confronted Daniel. "Why didn't you correct him?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "You know how they are. They want a certain look. If I had said anything, it would have embarrassed them." "It would have told the truth," Marcus shot back. The silence that followed said everything. The investors' dinner. The breaking point arrived on a Saturday night, a night Marcus would never forget. The restaurant buzzed with anticipation for a private dinner hosting a group of international investors. The owners wanted to impress, to secure new funding that would expand La Lumiere beyond New York. Marcus had crafted the menu meticulously. Each dish was personal, each flavor intentional. He wanted the investors to taste not only skill, but vision. Hours of preparation had gone into that evening, and Marcus stood ready to lead his team into battle once more. But just before service began, the manager entered with a stranger, a tall European man in a pristine chef's coat, embroidered with gold initials. "Marcus," the manager said briskly, "this is Chef Laurent. He'll be presenting the dishes tonight." Marcus blinked. "Presenting? These are my dishes." The manager's smile was thin, calculated. "Our investors are accustomed to certain faces. Laurent's presence will reassure them." "Don't take it personally. It's optics." Optics. That word again. Marcus's blood turned cold. "So I create the menu, I train the team, I build this night, and then I'm told to step aside because I don't look the part?" The manager didn't flinch. "It's business. Don't ruin it with pride." The breaking point. As the first course was carried out, Marcus watched Chef Laurent take credit for the braised scallops he had perfected, the sweet potato puree he had refined, the duck breast cooked exactly to his specifications. Applause drifted from the dining room as Laurent bowed graciously, smiling for the cameras. Something inside Marcus snapped. He tore off his apron, the strings whipping against his side. The clatter silenced the kitchen for a moment. His brigade looked up, shocked, but Marcus didn't stop. He slammed his knives into their case, each clang a punctuation of betrayal. "I'm done," he said, his voice low but seething. "You can have your optics, but you'll never have my soul." The manager rushed in, hissing, "Marcus, don't do this. Think about your future." Marcus turned on him, eyes blazing. "My future? You've been erasing it from the moment this place won its star." Then he walked out, mid-service. With plates still leaving the pass, with investors still laughing in the dining room, with the kitchen still stunned into silence, Marcus Johnson left La Lumiere. The silence. After the world outside felt colder than it had in years, he walked the streets of Manhattan, the glow of neon signs reflecting in rain-slicked pavement. His hands shook, not from fear, but from fury and grief. How could a place that had once been his dream become his prison? How could the very star he had fought for turn into a weapon used against him? By the time he reached his apartment, the rage had drained, leaving only exhaustion. His wife, Maria, met him at the door, worry etched into her features. Their baby daughter, Lily, slept in her crib in the corner, her small chest rising and falling with peace that Marcus longed to feel. Maria listened quietly as Marcus recounted the betrayal. When he finished, she cupped his face in her hands. "Then maybe it's time you stop building their dream," she whispered, "and start building your own." The small diner. Weeks later, Marcus opened a modest diner in the Bronx. It wasn't glamorous. The paint on the walls was chipped, the sign outside flickered on and off, and the tables were mismatched. But the air was filled with the smell of fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and ribs simmering in rich sauce. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. A Michelin-trained chef was cooking comfort food with the soul of a home kitchen. Families lined up. Old men played dominoes in the corner while savoring bowls of gumbo. Kids licked their fingers clean after plates of barbecue. Marcus didn't care about critics anymore. He didn't care about stars or investors. All he cared about was the look on a customer's face when they took the first bite and closed their eyes in delight. This was food that healed, food that told stories, food that belonged to him. The years pass. Time moved forward. The diner thrived in its own humble way. Marcus's wife passed too soon, leaving him to raise Lily alone. She grew up among the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, the scent of her father's cooking. To her, the diner was not just a restaurant. It was home. And every so often, she would ask about La Lumiere. "Daddy, is it true you once cooked in the fanciest restaurant in the city?" Marcus would smile sadly. "Yes, baby. But fancy doesn't always mean good. What we do here, this is just as important." Still, the old wound never fully healed. The memory of being erased, of walking away from the star he had earned, remained a quiet scar beneath his skin. The night air in Manhattan carried that restless energy unique to the city. A constant hum of traffic, laughter from bars, the shuffle of footsteps on concrete. Marcus Johnson walked quietly, his daughter Lily's small hand folded tightly into his. She was 10 years old now, her eyes alive with curiosity and wonder. Tonight, she wore a simple white dress, her hair tied back with a ribbon, as if she knew this was supposed to be a special occasion. "This is it, Daddy?" she asked, gazing up at the glowing facade before them. The sign above the revolving doors glittered in gold. La Lumiere. The restaurant had grown even more polished since Marcus's days inside its kitchen. Its marble steps gleamed under the streetlights. The glass windows revealed a dining room alive with soft candlelight and clinking glasses. To Lily, it looked like magic. "Yes, baby," Marcus said softly. "This is the place I told you about. The one that once felt like my world." He hadn't wanted to come. For years, he'd avoided even walking past this block, detouring whenever possible, pretending that part of his life was closed forever. But Lily had begged. She had heard the stories, had tasted the food her father recreated in their humble diner, and wanted to see the palace where he had once reigned. So here they were. At the door inside, warmth and music spilled into the lobby. Couples dressed in evening gowns and tuxedos drifted past, their conversations smooth and practiced. Marcus approached the hostess stand, his heart steady, but his chest tight. "Good evening," he said. "Do you have any tables for two tonight?" The hostess glanced at her screen, then at Marcus. Her polite smile faltered, just slightly. She took in his plain shirt, his daughter's simple dress, and something in her gaze hardened. "I'm sorry, sir," she said in a practiced tone. "We are fully booked tonight. Without a reservation, I'm afraid I cannot seat you." Marcus nodded slowly, prepared for this answer. He had expected exclusivity, perhaps even suspicion. But before he could reply, she added, her tone colder this time. And especially not tonight. We have a private event. This is not the kind of evening for walk-ins. Her eyes flicked briefly toward his daughter. Something unspoken lingered between her words. This isn't a place for you, not people like you. Marcus's jaw clenched. He felt Lily's small fingers tighten in his. But ma'am, Lily said innocently, my dad used to work here. He said this was his kitchen. The hostess raised an eyebrow, her smile turning into something closer to pity. I'm sure your father has a wonderful imagination, but this is La Lumière. The humiliation. The words landed like a slap. Marcus swallowed hard, trying not to show the hurt, not to let his daughter see how deep it cut. He bent down and whispered, It's all right, Lily. But his voice cracked on the edges. Why don't they believe you, Daddy? Lily asked, her eyes searching his. Because they never wanted to, Marcus thought. Because no matter how many stars I earned them, I was always invisible. He straightened, his pride battling against the sting of humiliation. I promised I'd show you this place, he said to his daughter. But maybe I was wrong to bring us here. As he turned to leave, the dining room behind the glass suddenly shifted. Heads turned, conversations hushed, and from the open kitchen doors, a familiar figure emerged. Recognition. Marcus? The voice froze him in his tracks. He turned to see a man in a pristine white chef's coat walking swiftly toward him. His hair, once dark, now carried streaks of silver, but the face was unmistakable. Daniel, Marcus whispered. Daniel. His old sous chef, the young cook he had once mentored, corrected, pushed, and protected through long nights of service. The man now wore the uniform of an executive chef, his posture confident, his presence commanding. In an instant, Daniel's expression transformed from shock to joy. He closed the distance and clasped Marcus's arm with both hands. My God, Daniel said, voice thick with emotion. It really is you. I thought you'd disappeared. The hostess's face drained of color. The manager, who had been watching the scene unfold from a distance, hurried forward. His expression caught between irritation and alarm. Chef Daniel, the hostess stammered. They don't have a reservation. I was just explaining. Daniel cut her off, his tone sharp. Do you know who this man is? This is Marcus Johnson, the man who taught me everything, the man who built this kitchen. The words carried across the dining room, where diners had begun to lean in, whispers buzzing like electricity. Some of the older patrons tilted their heads, recognition dawning as they remembered reviews from years past, the name that had once been whispered in culinary circles. The invitation. Marcus, Daniel said, turning back to him. You have to come in. Tonight is a special night. We're celebrating the restaurant's history, and none of it means anything without you. Marcus hesitated. His instincts told him to refuse, to turn and walk away before the wound deepened further. But Lily's eyes shone with awe and pride, her grip on his hand urging him silently forward. He looked at her, then at Daniel, and finally nodded. For the first time in over a decade, Marcus stepped back inside La Lumière, the past in the walls. The lobby smelled the same, clean linen and expensive perfume. The dining room glowed with elegance, the kind of refinement that money bought but heart could not. As Marcus crossed the threshold, memories surged. He could see himself younger, commanding the line with fire in his eyes. He could hear the clang of knives, the hiss of pans, the rush of adrenaline. But he also remembered the betrayal, the humiliation, the night he had walked away. The ghosts of both triumph and pain clung to every wall. Lily tugged his arm. Daddy, are you okay? Yes, baby, Marcus said softly. I'm okay, just remembering. The hum of La Lumière's kitchen was different from the one Marcus remembered. In his day, it had been a battlefield, harsh, merciless, filled with shouting and clattering metal. Now, as he followed Daniel past the swinging doors, he noticed a quieter rhythm. It was no less intense, but there was respect in the air, an energy of collaboration rather than fear. Still, Marcus felt out of place. The cooks who turned to look at him were mostly young, faces fresh, uniforms crisp, knives gleaming from their first years in professional kitchens. They eyed him curiously, whispering to each other. Some had heard his name, no doubt, like a ghost story passed down from chef to chef, the man who had built the restaurant, then vanished without a trace. "Everyone," Daniel announced, his voice echoing across the tiled walls. "This is Marcus Johnson. Without him, La Lumiere would not be what it is. He is the reason we have this star, and the reason I am the chef I am today." The kitchen went still. Some of the younger cooks straightened, almost like soldiers at attention. A pastry chef whispered, "That's him?" Marcus raised a hand, awkward. "Evening, I'm just passing through." But Daniel shook his head. "Not tonight. Tonight you're cooking," the reluctance. Marcus froze. "It's been years, Daniel. I don't belong here anymore." "You never stopped belonging," Daniel said firmly. "This is still your kitchen. Show them. Show her." He tilted his head toward Lily, who stood wide-eyed by the doorway. Her gaze shone with pride and anticipation, and Marcus felt his resolve waver. He had promised himself never to return to this world, never to let its flames burn him again. But his daughter's eyes pierced through his fear. "Daddy," Lily whispered, "please." The word landed softly, but it carried more weight than any command he'd ever received. The first flame. Marcus sighed, stepped forward, and tied on a spare apron. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms still corded with muscle. Despite years of simpler work at the diner, his hands trembled slightly as he reached for a knife, but the moment he wrapped his fingers around the handle, something clicked. The blade felt natural, like an extension of his body. He picked up an onion and began to dice. The knife sang against the cutting board, clean, precise, rhythmic. The kitchen grew quiet as the younger cooks watched. For them, knife skills were drills, something to master through repetition. For Marcus, it was second nature, honed over decades. His cuts were even, his movements fluid, as if he had never left. "Still faster than any of you," Daniel muttered with a grin. Laughter rippled through the staff, easing the tension. The ice was broken. The command returns. Daniel handed Marcus a menu card. "We're serving the classics tonight, but I think they deserve to taste one of yours." Marcus scanned the dishes and shook his head. "These aren't mine anymore." "Then make them yours again," Daniel said simply. Something in the challenge stirred him. He glanced around the pantry, the spices, the herbs. He pulled ingredients instinctively. Duck breast, sweet potatoes, thyme, garlic, red wine. His hands moved without conscious thought, assembling what he once called the memory dish, a plate that had earned rave reviews in his heyday, a blend of French precision and soul food warmth. He set a pan on the burner. Oil shimmered. He laid the duck breast skin side down, the crackle filling the kitchen like applause. He basted it with butter, thyme, and garlic, tilting the pan with practiced grace. Meanwhile, he simmered sweet potatoes, infused them with saffron, and whipped them into a golden puree. The younger chefs gathered close, watching every movement. They whispered, but none dared interrupt. To them, this was more than cooking. It was witnessing history come alive, the moment of doubt. As the dish neared completion, Marcus felt a pang of hesitation. What if his touch was gone? What if the diners didn't understand, didn't care? The humiliation at the door, the years of erasure. What if this ended in more of the same? He looked up. Lily stood at the edge of the pass, her small hands clasped together, her face glowing with pride. "You can do it, Daddy," she mouthed. The doubt melted away. Marcus plated the dish carefully, duck breast perfectly pink at the center, skin crisp and glistening, puree silky and radiant, sauce rich and glossy, drizzled with precision. He set down the spoon and exhaled. The first bite. A server whisked the plate into the dining room. The seconds stretched. The kitchen waited, breath held. Then came a sound, a gasp, followed by a ripple of applause. One diner stood to look toward the kitchen doors, craning for a glimpse. Then another, and another. Soon voices carried, "Who made this? This tastes like nothing I've ever had before. It's back. The old brilliance." Marcus felt his chest tighten. The validation he had been denied for so long now poured in waves, not from critics or investors, but from the only voices that truly mattered, the diners who tasted his food. Daniel clapped him on the back. "Told you! You never lost it." The kitchen transformed, word spread quickly through the restaurant. Diners leaned toward each other, whispering Marcus's name. Staff who had once doubted now stared at him with reverence. Even the manager, red-faced and flustered, stood silently in the corner, unable to deny what was unfolding. Marcus found himself calling orders, guiding hands, correcting techniques. The old cadence returned, sharp, efficient, alive. He was not just cooking, he was leading again. For the first time in over a decade, Marcus felt whole. A daughter's pride. When the rush slowed, Lily slipped into the kitchen. She threw her arms around his waist, burying her face in his apron. "You were amazing," she whispered. "I always knew you were, but now everyone knows too." Marcus knelt to meet her eyes, his own misting. "Baby, I don't care if the world knows, as long as you do." But deep down, he felt something else, a quiet vindication. The years of erasure, the humiliation, the doubt, it had all led to this moment, where truth could no longer be denied. The dining room of La Lumière was alive with applause. Chairs scraped back as diners stood to their feet, their hands clapping in unison, faces glowing with admiration. Some were smiling broadly, others dabbing their eyes with napkins. It wasn't just polite appreciation, it was genuine, visceral. And at the center of it all, standing behind the pass with his daughter's small hand in his, was Marcus Johnson. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The sound washed over him like a tide, and with it came memories. Every long night, every slight, every betrayal. The boy in the Bronx peeling potatoes in a diner kitchen. The line cook mocked for daring to dream. The chef who earned a Michelin star only to have his name erased. The man who had walked away, broken and bitter. Now here he stood, being seen at last. The manager's silence. Near the back wall, the manager who had once sneered at Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. He looked as though he wanted to speak, to claim some part of the triumph, but the words stuck in his throat. The truth was undeniable, laid bare in front of staff, diners, and investors alike. The soul of La Lumière had never been in its chandeliers or fine linens. It had been in Marcus's hands all along. For once, the manager had no power. He could not erase what an entire room had witnessed. Daniel approached Marcus, his chef's whites streaked with the night's labor, his eyes bright with emotion. He clasped Marcus's hand firmly, then pulled him into an embrace. "Do you see now?" Daniel said. "You were never forgotten. Not by me. Not by the people who tasted your food. This house was built on you, and tonight it remembers." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Thank you, Daniel. But this is your kitchen now. You've carried it further than I ever could." Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm just keeping the fire alive. You lit it." Lily's moment. Lily tugged at her father's sleeve, her face glowing with pride. "Daddy, everyone knows now. They know you're the best chef in the world." Marcus knelt, resting his hands gently on her shoulders. "No, baby. I'm not the best. There will always be someone younger, faster, more inventive. But I am yours, and that's all that matters." She hugged him tightly, her little arms squeezing with all her strength. In her embrace, Marcus felt something more powerful than recognition, more enduring than applause. He felt the reason he had survived every humiliation and every loss, the afterglow. The service wound down. Diners finished their meals with smiles and lingering conversations. Many stopped at the kitchen doors on their way out, offering Marcus words of thanks. Some recalled eating dishes he had created years ago, memories that had never left them. "Your food made me believe again," one elderly woman whispered, tears in her eyes. "You gave us something no one else could," another said, shaking his hand firmly. Marcus accepted each word quietly, humbly. He no longer needed validation, but he accepted it with gratitude. The choice. Later, when the dining room had emptied and the kitchen lights dimmed, Daniel approached Marcus once more. "You could come back," Daniel said. "There's always a place for you here. We could share the title, co-chefs, partners. The city would celebrate you." Marcus was silent for a long moment. He looked around the kitchen, the gleaming counters, the neatly stacked pans, the young cooks still buzzing with excitement. It was tempting. A part of him longed to reclaim what had been stolen, to stand in the light that had once been denied him. But then he thought of his diner in the Bronx, the mismatched tables, the children laughing as they ate fried chicken with sticky fingers, the old men playing dominoes, the smell of gumbo simmering slowly while neighbors crowded around. That was home. That was where he belonged. "I can't come back," Marcus said gently. "This isn't my world anymore. It was, once, and I'll always be grateful. But my story, it's being written somewhere else now." Daniel's eyes softened with understanding. "Then promise me one thing. Don't ever stop cooking." Marcus smiled. "That I can promise." The walk home. Marcus and Lily stepped back into the night, leaving the glow of La Lumiere behind them. The city was alive as ever, horns blaring, laughter spilling from late-night bars, the smell of roasted peanuts from a street vendor. But the heaviness Marcus had carried for years seemed to lift with every step. Lily skipped beside him, holding his hand. "Daddy, can I tell my friends my dad cooked in the fanciest restaurant in the city?" He chuckled softly. "You can tell them whatever you like." "But I think your food at the diner is even better," she added, grinning. Marcus looked down at her, his heart swelling. "That's because it's made with love. And love tastes better than stars." A quiet ending. Back at their modest apartment, Marcus tucked Lily into bed. She fell asleep quickly, her breathing steady, her dreams surely filled with glowing chandeliers and applause. Marcus stood for a while, watching her sleep, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. He realized that for years he had been chasing recognition, fighting against erasure, desperate to be seen by the world. But the world's gaze was fickle, fleeting. What mattered was here, his daughter's pride, his community's joy, the unshakable truth of who he was when the knives were in his hands and the fire burned hot. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the night quiet around him. He took out a notebook and began scribbling ideas for new dishes. Not for Michelin inspectors, not for critics, but for Lily, for his neighbors, for anyone who would walk into his little diner hungry for warmth. The flame inside him, once dimmed, now burned steady and strong. The legacy. Weeks later, word spread about what had happened at La Lumiere. Some called it a comeback, others a miracle. But Marcus didn't care. He returned to his diner each day, cooking with the same passion, smiling at the same regulars, serving food that told his story. And though the world might never carve his name in golden letters, those who ate his food carried it in their hearts. That was his star, his legacy. Closing note. In the end, Marcus understood something he had not in his youth. True greatness isn't measured by accolades or recognition. It is measured by the lives you touch, the love you share, and the flame you keep alive no matter who tries to extinguish it. And with Lily by his side, that flame would never die.